Welcome back to another episode of Kavanaugh's Corner. Today on the channel, we're going to be reviewing a box set here that just came out just a little over a week ago. And it took me a little while to go through all the films in this set, so you have to excuse the gap in time for the review for this. But I really wanted to make sure I went through these because these are films that I grew up with and I'm very fond of. I remember owning all of these on VHS and then on DVD and then on Blu-ray. So these are movies that I've owned in various formats, and it's great to have them in 4K. But today we're going to be talking about the new 4K set of what they're calling the Superman Collection. This is the 5-film collection dating from 1978 to 1987. These are the original Christopher Reeve Superman films. These are all now remastered in 4K, and we're going to really focus on the visuals and the audio on the new 4Ks because the standard Blu-rays seem to be the same the same Blu-rays we had before. As far as I know, there's really nothing changed there. Each one of the movies does have a set of special features. There's also a steelbook version of the set that is going for a lot of money right now. If you were smart enough to pre-order this, I missed the pre-order for the steelbook, but the artwork on the steelbook sets are definitely extraordinarily better than the ones we got here, which is kind of a ding that I'm going to give this set. But kind of starting off right away, we're going to jump right in because I have 5 movies to go through here. Let's start off with Superman the movie. So this is the original Superman film directed by Richard Donner. This is one of my all-time favorite superhero films. This really kind of set the standard for superhero movies over the years. Kind of made it believable to make a semi-serious superhero film. And Richard Donner, God rest his soul, one of the all-time greatest directors. I mean, what else can you say? Christopher Reeve, extraordinary in this. Margot Kidder, pretty much everybody in this. Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, you name it. Everybody in this movie just really is fantastic. And it's a 2-disc set. Every one of these is 2 discs. You got the 4K and the Blu-ray. And this here, again, is kind of a re-release. This came out a couple years ago on 4K, and I reviewed it here on the channel. And my opinion of this 4K has actually kind of changed a little bit over the years. This new 4K has Dolby Vision grading. It's actually, sadly, the only movie in the set where they went and did Dolby Vision for the movie. And there were rumors for a while that this was going to be an all-new remaster because Warner Brothers wasn't really, I guess, extremely happy with the original remaster that they did for the 4K. Now, watching this, I did not really see very much of a difference between this 4K with the Dolby Vision versus the original one that has just the HDR10 on it. This film here, when I originally watched it, I thought it was a fairly good transfer. Now I kind of see some of the issues that this film has. Skin tones are very, very saturated. The colors in this all throughout are really vivid, and they don't look bad, but they are almost too oversaturated at times. And I can understand how people don't like that. It is a very vivid picture all throughout. Is it accurate to the original intentions of the director? Probably not. Again, this is one of these movies that, has that kind of comic book feel to it. I mean, it is a superhero film, and it's a very well done movie. I mean, I really enjoy this movie, but it being in 4K, this one and actually pretty much all the films in the set, the 4K does something that I think is really interesting, and it's that the higher resolution, which again, for the most part, looks really good, does reveal a lot of the older technology, the composite filmmaking that was used to achieve a lot of the special effects that were done for pretty much all these films. And the special effects look, uh, without being mean, they look incredibly janky now. And if you can deal with that, it kind of goes towards the charm of the film, in my opinion. But that's something you kind of have to deal with throughout all these films I'm going to talk about today. The black levels on this disc are okay. Again, the colors on this are just a tad too saturated. Skin tones, sometimes people look almost orange in this. It's not the greatest transfer. But picture quality as a whole, it is a very vivid picture. And I think if you can kind of look past the extreme heavy grain at times, you may end up enjoying it. Again, it's really, one of these your mileage may vary type of things. Is the original Superman film worth picking up if you already have it? Unless you buy the box set, sadly, I'm going to say no. If you already have the older version of Superman in 4K, I really did not see much of a differential. The Dolby Atmos track on this is, I think it's pretty solid, but again, a lot of people are not fans of it because they add a lot of new sound effects and things, and the sound effects are very modern, and it's a film that came out in 1978. Sadly, the original stereo track from the other 4K is not on this. There is a stereo, but it is not the original stereo. I think it's kind of like a folded down version of the 5.1. But the Dolby Atmos track is very serviceable if you can kind of get past the new sound effects and things like that. I think John Williams' score sounds really, really great in this. It's just, this is definitely one of those your mileage may vary type of things. Superman 2 here, again, like I said, not really fond of these covers. These are really bland covers, but Superman 2 got the same kind of treatment. We got a new 4K transfer here. This is just HDR10. There's no Dolby Vision on this. This fares a little bit better, in my opinion. Skin tones are a lot more accurate. It does get extremely bright at times. The color on this is much more lifelike, much more balanced. The black levels at times are, again, a little hit and miss, especially the scene near the beginning where the criminals are escaping from the Phantom Zone. General Zod and company are just kind of flying out. Some of those black levels are really lousy in that intro there, but they kind of get better on and off as the movie goes on. Thankfully, this is usually, for the most part, it's a very well lit film, and the bright daytime scenes look really good. The detail level on this is also really good, but yet again, the 4K really brings out some major visual issues when you go to the composite shots where you can clearly see they're overlapping one element over another to achieve a special effect. It really does not look good now, and it may actually take you out of the picture, whereas before you may not have noticed it. It's definitely apparent now, especially in this film. And it's a lot of fun. I do enjoy this movie, and this is definitely a step up from the older Blu-ray in terms of picture quality, in my opinion. This also has a new Dolby Atmos track, and this one here, the Dolby Atmos track, is pretty much just an extended version of the original soundtrack. I didn't really notice any new finagled things that were added in. It's just a new mix of that original audio, and I thought it sounded really good. The music sounded great, the special effects sounded great. I just, this one here was, I think, an improvement compared to the original Superman film on 4K. I think Warner Brothers did a pretty decent job on this one. Moving right on to Superman 2, this is the Richard Donner cut. Again, this one here is actually ironically enough, it's the newest of all these films we're going to talk about today, because this was done back in the early 2000s. I want to say 2006, 2005. Yeah, 2006. They allowed Richard Donner to go back and kind of make Superman 2 the movie that he was originally supposed to make, before they handed it off to Richard Lester and he was let go. This one here looks really, really good. However, the substandard CGI and some of the added things that they put into this one, the score being kind of changed to just use John Williams' score instead of the Ken Thorne score that is used in Superman 2. It's kind of hit or miss. Again, this is one of those ones where the picture quality, for the most part, since this is a newer master of the film, looks really good. Again, there are some times where that grain gets really heavy. I'm glad they didn't DNR the crap out of any of these films where they just use that digital noise reduction and you lose the detail quality. This one here looks very solid at times, and I think the color and skin tones and the brightness and just overall the HDR on this really does a lot to make it a more vivid but yet not saturated color palette. So they did a really good job with that. However, the scenes that use some of the outtakes, and again, they use some kind of not so great CGI at times to kind of put together the movie that this was originally supposed to be. Those really do look cheap now, and it kind of does take you out of the film, especially the audition footage that they use for one scene in particular in this, without giving it away. That now looks very, very different compared to some of the other elements in the film, and again, can take you right out of it. It takes you right out of the film. Again, for me, I think this is a really good transfer for the most part, and they did do another Dolby Atmos track for this, which sounds pretty good. But again, some of the audio effects kind of are wonky here and there. I wasn't too nuts about it, but it's a serviceable track. The music sounds great. It's just one of those ones where if you are a fan of that Richard Donner cut, it's going to look the best it ever has in this. And, there's not much more to say than that if you're a fan of this cut. I prefer the theatrical cut, even though it's not really what was originally intended. That, to me, kind of makes more sense as a film, and it doesn't seem as janky as this one does, but this is a very solid film on its own, and it's interesting to see how this movie would have turned out if Richard Donner was just allowed to continue directing like he did the original film. So it's kind of nice there. And we go to Superman 3. This is a really interesting one here, because this is probably my least favorite of all the Superman films. I really didn't like some of the departures they took with this movie. Richard Lester just kind of going full on comedy in this one. You got a problem when Richard Pryor is in this and doesn't really provide next to any comedy throughout the entirety of the film. It's just a really big waste of talent, in my opinion. But this one here, again, just a horrible cover, and they even have a shot in the back of Margot Kidder, who's actually not in the scene's not in this movie, but anyway, uh, they did a really good job with Superman 3. It's funny how this is my least favorite Superman film, but in my opinion, I think it's the best looking one in the set. This one has a fantastic picture. The HDR on this, the color on it is great. The detail level on it is great. Black levels and the darker scenes look great. For the most part, this is the best looking Superman film out of this original series. I was kind of blown away by it because I really am not a fan of this, but this is a really good transfer here, and I was very impressed. Again, the grain does get pretty chunky at times in this when they go to those optical effects. It's just kind of an artifact that happens when you do that. But for the most part, it was very, very well done. And again, the audio track on this is another Dolby Atmos track. Ken Thorne's music sounded really good. They just did a really good job with this one. This is actually the best out of all of them. And, I recommend this one more than any of them. But again, you got to buy the set to get them. So if you're a fan of Superman 3, you're really going to enjoy that new transfer there. And now we go to the pièce de résistance, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. This one here, this is kind of an infamously bad movie, had a very troubled production. The budget was cut in a major way as they were filming, and the special effects and stuff really suffered. Now, the picture quality on this, again, it's an HDR10 transfer. Picture quality on this is actually pretty good. It looks pretty good. Again, the substandard special effects that were used for this, especially this has probably some of the worst special effects compared to all of them because of that budget that was cut. But the rest of the movie actually looks really, really good in this one. And I'd say at times, sometimes better than Superman 3. This is a really, really good transfer here. And I think, is from what I've been able to find out, they actually went back and removed some of the visible wires and things that were seen in older cuts of this film. So they actually kind of touched it up a little for this new 4K. And you can tell that they tried to clean it up as best as they could. But again, some of those optical effects, they really do look janky. And that's just because of the way that that was done back then. Again, it's 1987, this film, so still not great. I mean, there were advances in technology since the other three films were done, but because of that lower budget, they really weren't allowed to do all that they could have done with this movie, which is too bad. Now, this movie here, out of the whole set, is a big source of controversy. And I will be the first one to admit that when I heard about this, I kind of couldn't believe that a screw up of this magnitude could be done on a movie this big. It seems that Warner Brothers has put the wrong orchestral session that was done when they were making this film. Alexander Courage did the music for this one, who's actually worked with John Williams and actually used a lot of John Williams' music in this instead of Ken Thorne. Courage did the music for this one. And in the original Superman films, to be honest, the first one and this one are probably the best in terms of musical score. They are really, really good. Don't get me wrong, Superman 2 is great, but this one, for some reason, it had a really good score. Alexander Courage did a really good score adapting John Williams' music. However, when they originally went and recorded, they did 2 sessions or multiple sessions, as far as I know. And the original recording session was done with musicians that couldn't hit a note if it was on the broadside of a barn. So they redid the score. They re-recorded it with newer, different, more experienced musicians. And you got the score that's in the original version of the film. Well, for this version, Warner Brothers put in the wrong session. And even though I have not seen Superman 4 dozens of times, I've seen it quite a few times. I mean, I kind of enjoyed this movie when I was a kid, even though it's extremely silly and just ridiculously bad at times. There are parts of this movie that I enjoy, and the music was one of them. You can kind of tell. You don't really have to have a trained ear to tell that it's the wrong score in this. And it does not sound very good. It sounds like there are instruments missing, and it does not have the same kind of delivery or punch that the original score has. I don't know how this got past quality control, if there is a quality control now at Warner Brothers. There's been a lot of issues with that and with a lot of different companies. But I sincerely hope, Warner Brothers, I really hope that you put out a program where you can replace the 4K disc with one that has the correct audio on here, because it makes a movie that the music was the best part of, makes it a laughable watch now. I don't think it impacts it to an extreme degree, but the music is definitely off, and you can tell. And I am no expert in this field. I'll be the first one to admit that I am not a musician in any way, shape, or form, but boy, does it not sound good on this disc. And I really hope in the future, Warner Brothers will correct that. And that's pretty much it for these reviews here. Each one of these Blu-ray discs come with extra special features and stuff like that. Every one of them has got some kind of deleted scene making of documentary. There's also commentary tracks on most of the 4Ks. So as a whole, if what I can say is, if you're a fan of Christopher Reeve and the Superman series, this is worth a pickup if you're a big, big fan. If you are not a fan of these films, this is kind of a miss. I mean, don't get me wrong, the movies do look pretty solid. For the most part, again, I think they all look way better than their Blu-ray counterparts for the most part, but there's definitely some issues here and there with audio and picture, especially that giant audio mix-up with Superman 4. Uh, again, it's really up to the viewer if they want to pick this up. I really enjoy the Christopher Reeve Superman films. Again, it's kind of a nostalgic thing for me. If you're not a fan, this is not worth it, sadly. But if you do want to see these films and you do want to see them in the highest quality possible, then I do recommend it, because, again, for the most part, they do look better than their Blu-ray counterparts. But just use caution with the things that I mentioned in this review here, because there are some issues here and there with these films on 4K. So anyway, that's all for today for Kavanaugh's Corner. I hope you enjoyed this review, even though it was a little bit lengthy, going through 5 films and trying to give my opinion on each one is a challenge. But if you enjoyed this, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel below so you can see more reviews once I publish them here, and hit that bell icon so you get the notifications. As always, please stay safe and take it easy.